Hello. Good morning, esteemed guests, respected faculty, fellow students, and all attendees, and welcome to our beautiful campus. It is my profound honor to welcome you all to IIIT Hyderabad's inaugural event of R&D Showcase, a testament of IIIT Hyderabad's unwavering commitment to innovation, applied research, and societal impact. The theme for this year's showcase, Interconnect, highlights the relationship between algorithms, ethics, and society, urging us to reflect on how technology shapes our world and, more importantly, how we can harness it to benefit humanity. Last year, the R&D Showcase was a great success, and this year we are excited to have you all with us. On behalf of the IIIT community, I am honored to welcome you to IIIT Hyderabad's R&D Showcase 2024. To begin with, I would like to welcome the director of the institute, Professor P.J. Narayanan, to give the welcome address.
Good morning and welcome to IIIT and to the 2024 R&D Showcase, 2024 edition of R&D Showcase. This is definitely the harvest festival of IIIT. We are being a research university, what all we do, we put it out to the world to see, starting with not just the high-end research done in the research labs with all PhD students and so on, but also smaller projects, something interesting, done even by undergraduate students of second year, third year, fourth year, etc. You will see for next 2 days, the entire lot of the academic area completely taken over by them. And this is something we started back before even the first batch graduated in 2002. We had the first such show in the Vindhya building in the last corridor. I think maybe about 10 or 15, that's a small batch graduating, small number of students. Probably we had 15 or 20 things on display. And I was just talking to PK. He said he was the first student coordinator in 2003 R&D Showcase. The first, I think probably that's the time we got the name R&D Showcase. And Jayanti was the faculty coordinator and PK was the student coordinator. So now, I think soon you should be the faculty coordinator here also. So you can complete the circle. So this is something that we have been, we are very excited about. And tomorrow is a combined R&D Showcase and XOR. XOR stands for Excitement of Research. This is a kind of a 1 day or sometimes 2 day workshop that we used to conduct early years where to attract a lot of students in say final year or pre-final year from colleges around here, or some of them come from somewhat far also, and expose them to the kind of activities going on here through projects and students, these students questioning our students or learning from or asking questions to our students and trying to understand how research is done, etc., is to carry some of the research spirit back into their colleges, and they will also hopefully get excited by the opportunity to do research and get into a research career, possibly at IIIT Hyderabad itself. So the XOR has now been combined into the R&D Showcase there, because then those visiting students who come get to see the entire gamut of our research display. So that happens tomorrow, but today we'll have a lot of invitees from corporates and other uh, places, the government labs, you send invitation to all kinds of research teams, and those will be the primary target for today's showcase. Tomorrow we'll have more students, but also some of the other professionals around here. So this is the time. I see a lot of IIIT community here, students and faculty and others. This is the time for us to understand what everybody else is doing beyond our labs or beyond our students. So go around, look at them, ask some questions, give the students some tough time, trying to defend what they are doing, explain what they are doing, because that's what research is about. It's not just getting something done. It's about understanding, being able to explain, and that way they'll know how to improve it also. So welcome once to the next edition, once again to this next edition of R&D Showcase. Have a good time for the next 2 days, and I'm particularly glad about the theme chosen this time, because I think this can't be more appropriate for these times. The computer systems, or most notably AI systems, are running amok, or depending on whom you ask, they are either going to take over the world next year, or they are going to remain in this hallucinatory phase and become a object of a lot of ridicule or something in between. But it is clear the so-called AI system or algorithmic systems are here to stay, and they have started to impact our life very seriously, not just improving our lives through automation in the past, which has been happening for 50 years maybe, but through these generative AI, generated text or images or video or something. This is going to be a huge presence in our life. Hopefully, most of it is positive, but we are seeing the negatives come first, the positives are slow. So we have to all be vigilant, especially this year is an election year. Today the election dates will be announced, and another 2 months, next 2 months will be election time, and then that's the time all kinds of propaganda happens, good, bad, ugly. And that's where we are all worried about the algorithmic systems playing a role that is not entirely positive. So I'm eagerly looking forward to the discussions relating to this that they have arranged for this R&D Showcase. So enjoy the next 2 days. Welcome to R&D Showcase once again. Bye.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that. Now I would like to invite the Dean R&D of the Institute, Professor C.V. Jawahar, to address the gathering.
Thank you. Welcome again to this event. So I just want to give a little bit background about the IIIT's research vision and what we have been planning, thinking, doing, and aim to do. So when we started the institute in '98, we started as an undergraduate institute with only undergraduate students. But by then itself, it was clear that the focus should be on research. The students, whether it is undergraduate students or whatever you have available on campus, should focus on research or should contribute to the research. With this vision, the curriculum, the practices, the design of the institute, how we should connect to the society when the research happens, all of them were kept in mind. Now, in a way, when we look at our programs here, there is always emphasis for research for all. Research that is accessible to people of different type participating. Research that is also accessible to or impacting people of all type, whether it is from government, society directly, industry, academic research, future generations. So that way the research focus has been very kept broad. There are theoretical research, there are applied research, there are software, there are hardware, different type of thing that you see. So in a way that a right balance or possibly keeping equal importance for all of them has been always the practice. Now, beyond that, the next type of research focus or the direction that we have is the end-to-end research. If you look at research in the traditional universities, they were mostly done by PhD students and possibly end with papers or at the level of patents or maybe licensing. Of late, now people talk about how do you commercialize it, etc. But we look at more of, when you do research, it should be practiced also. So students are encouraged building prototype. The skills required for that early prototyping was taught even in undergraduate programs. We have been encouraging faculty members and students to validate their solutions with data, prototype, users, and know the limitations of what they do. That's the first feedback that they get. At the institutional level also, like what students do possibly are not fully ready for taking to the society. I'm sure what we see today in the 200, 250 odd posters and demos in the building, all of them are possibly not ready to use for students. Now we see, can we add an extra layer of effort to make it usable for the end users or active people who are actually using? So we have interface mechanisms for enabling that. So we wish this to academic research, to socially relevant research and socially relevant deployment of the research and impacting the society directly, indirectly is all kept as a focus of this. The third dimension of our research has been the openness of research. Openness in all respect. We would like to have labs open. People should be able to walk in and interact with people at any point of time. We have been encouraging faculty members and students always to collaborate within the research centers, outside the research centers, within institutions, outside institutions, with appropriate end users outside the institution, and encouraging more open research. And R&D Showcase is one of the such forum. We encourage faculty members and students to possibly present whatever they have been doing and allow people the people outside the campus to walk in with ease and walk into the labs, know the people who are doing, continue to collaborate with them, continue to talk to them, and see how this research can eventually impact or eventually be useful for somebody who really looking for. Being an IT institution, our research has, when we started, our research structure or research, the way we practice has been mostly rapid, in the sense of when the skills of rapid prototyping has been important because ideas come, people implement, people verify. This is possibly much faster than many of the classical areas. In classical engineering areas, classical science areas, possibly still slow, where the ideas to verification, experimental or field verification to practice is a long time. While in computer science or IT or computing or this area, things are much, much faster. Now we see in the AI area, this is still super fast. People get ideas, people they implement it, verify it, deploy it by the end of the day. On one hand, this is interesting, this is useful because your brain and hands work at the same speed. But it also creates now worries because there is no time to think about the repercussions of the ideas that we may be thinking. So this is possibly we are seeing now. Every such wave that we saw, every such major discoveries in the past, it came and good and bad got identified. It took time. Regulatory frameworks came into the picture with time. While in the case of technologies like AI, with the speed at which it is moving, we have not really understood how to work, how to live, how to practice, and what are the repercussions, how we should be prepared for that. When the time between thinking and doing was much larger, there was time for people to intervene, there were systems to intervene, system to make it discipline. Well, possibly that is lacking now. It is becoming more important for today's generation or the people who are doing it to know the repercussion themselves. So the theme that is chosen for this R&D showcase is especially keeping in this mind what we read everywhere, but being a IT institution or IT focused institution with a lot of AI strength, so it is important for us today to know how we keep in mind the impact of the technology in all aspects, in all dimensions. Good, bad, not just the immediate number of users, number of people who can download the solution, number of customers that you can have, and number of money that you can make. It is also important what type of technologies that are going to the society and how do we live with them. So I think this is a theme that broadly we have taken, and we have a very important, interesting panel discussion coming up. And I'm sure we systematically start absorbing these ideas into our research and into our practices, and benefit by the interaction that we have with even visitors that visiting to R&D Showcase for the next 2 days. Welcome all of you to R&D Showcase, and I look forward for interacting with you the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insights. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Anirban Das Gupta, Chairperson of the Human Sciences Research Center, onto the stage. We are very happy to inform you that HSRC has been chosen as the Spotlight Center for this year's showcase. I request Professor Anirban to share some information about the center's research and courses.
Well, I'll try to keep my speech very brief before fatigue sets in, and there is much more interesting discussions waiting for all of us in terms of the panel that we will listen to in the morning session. So I'll just say a couple of things following up on what the Dean R&D said. Very importantly, that what does technology that we are creating almost or versions of technology we are creating on a daily basis, how is it impacting the way we live? How does it impact the way we interact with each other? And the kind of larger evolution of society that is obviously happening all the time. The Human Sciences Research Center, which I'm representing here, is sort of an odd center in this IT-focused institution, but I think it belongs very much here because we have a set of faculty members from various disciplines in humanities and social sciences, and when I say various, it ranges from historians to philosophers to literary theorists to economists, political scientists, what have you. And while we do carry out our independent research agenda, one key focus for all of us is to understand, number one, how the technology that's evolving so fast is impacting society. And that's precisely what we are going to look at in this couple of sessions that HSRC has organized, starting with the first session here. And also, we do run, those of you who are visiting from outside, we do run a dual degree program which combines what we call human sciences, basically humanities and social sciences, with computational technology. And we train students in both these disciplines, and eventually they end up doing original research which tries to combine or look at the interface between these two domains of human knowledge. And so I would request all of you, invite all of you to take some time off in the afternoon to look at our senior students and their posters, which will actually give you a good flavor of what kind of work we have been doing. And I'm very, very proud of that. So welcome again. And without further ado, I think I'll request the next step to be commencing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Next up, we have a presentation by HSRC students on the right to know the algorithm to set the context for the plenary panel discussion. The presentation promises to be a thought-provoking session, inviting us to consider the ethical dimensions of technology and its influence on society. I would like to call upon Nanda and Sanika, who are third-year students at HSRC, and Adi, who is a second-year student at HSRC, to give the presentation.
You're surrounded by algorithms. So you woke up in the morning and you checked your email. So every single one of them has probably been through a spam filter to be in your inbox. You probably checked your newsfeed on your phone, maybe. Every single article was picked for you to be on your phone. If you drove here, GPS calculated the optimal path for you to be here today. Social media, ChatGPT, Swiggy, so many of the tools that we use today are built upon them. Algorithms are all at play continuously and are becoming increasingly ubiquitous. They're here to stay. Private players have long used these, and now public institutions around the world too are employing various kinds of algorithms. With their increased use, we're quick to dismiss algorithms that demonstrate any flaws as unusable, or alternately deem algorithms that we haven't seen make any mistakes as flawless. So it's important to note that algorithms are not infallible, neither are they useless because of this.
Algorithms reflect the data they were trained on and the context within which they were built. Statistical bias is a term used to describe statistics that don't provide an accurate representation of the population. For example, if you want to train a self-driving car, the car cannot just be trained on roads that are perfect. If the data is biased, the algorithms built on them are biased. Some people have dubbed data as the new oil, not just because it's fuel for a major commodity, but because its mining and after effects have far-reaching consequences. The data that is fed into algorithms is usually collected or generated by humans, which inherently means that it cannot be perfect, especially since determining a bias is highly subjective. There are certain tasks where making the algorithm unbiased is incredibly essential, as they can directly impact people's lives for the worse or for the better. Loan applications, resume screenings, university applications, court trials can change a person's life completely. If we want algorithms to replace humans in these situations, we cannot afford to make mistakes. Several incidents have probably caught your eye at some point or the other. So predictive policing is an algorithm that uses artificial intelligence to try and determine where crimes will occur next. The way it does this is by determining high-risk individuals and finding hotspots for crime. It is used to redirect police patrols and use them more efficiently. An initiative called PredPol, which is now called Geolitica by the Los Angeles Police Department, faced a lot of scrutiny as the algorithm predicted a lot more crimes in poorer and non-white neighborhoods. Areas that were patrolled more reported more petty crimes, which perpetuated a cycle of stereotyping and violence against minority communities. So now this has also been implemented in India in Delhi called CMAPS, or Crime Mapping Analytics and Predictive System, which relies on data collected every 3 minutes by ISRO satellites and historical crime data. These algorithms reflect the skews of the data sets they are built upon and disparately incriminate people of certain groups, demonstrating biases. We can look at another case in India where an Uber driver was locked out of his system for 40 days because facial recognition software that was employed by Uber failed to recognize the driver post shaving. This led to him missing an EMI payment for a car that he had bought on loan, as he had been unable to work after Uber blocked him out.
Prominent thinkers identify this paradigm shift. Shoshana Zuboff calls this current time the age of surveillance capitalism, where economic decisions are made with huge amounts of data being constantly collected and processed with incredible computational power. Young and O'Reilly coined the term algorithmic regulation, referring to a new way of coordinating and governing through algorithms. The amount of specificity in the data that is inferred by these algorithms from our behavior online is surprising. Case in point, Brian Switchcow, as a prank, managed to create ads so specific that Facebook's targeted advertising algorithm showed them only to his roommate. While his intention was merely to prank his roommate by showing him extremely specific targeted ads to make him paranoid, it brings to the fore an important observation. He was only able to do so by means of the large amount of data available to advertisers on Facebook to make advertisements. The number of inferences that algorithms at Facebook can make by means of your behavior by using their services is genuinely worrying. A user should be given some explanation of the outcomes of their algorithm so that they can know the extent of the data being consumed by them to learn more from your behavior.
As established earlier, the economic implications are massive. The value being generated by these systems is huge. There is incentive to keep them proprietary as they churn out and continue to churn out big profits. As society increasingly orients itself around algorithms, the individuals that are part of that society have a right to know the algorithm, a right to know why systems give the results that they give. Legal judgments made by ML models cannot be black boxed because it has a profound effect on the individuals involved. Applicants rejected by automated CV checkers deserve to know why they were rejected. Younger people and marginalized communities that are statistically likelier to be turned away by loan application softwares have a need to know why they were turned away.
What is more, opening up algorithms to the public makes it more likely for biases, surveillance, and errors to be minimized. In the world of algorithms, perhaps a great example of the same is the CSAM detection technology that was used by Apple to detect child sexual abuse material on users' iPhones. This feature was never rolled out due to fears of incorrect tagging, as well as concerns of privacy with relation to phones. However, the algorithms involved were open sourced, and Anish Athalye, a PhD candidate at MIT, came up with a pre-image attack against neural hash, one of the technologies used for CSAM detection. The classifier produced the same result for a certain kind of images that were specifically tailored to confuse the algorithm. As you can see, these are actually different images, but they produce the same hash value. Thus, making the algorithms open source revealed deep vulnerabilities within the code that could then be promptly fixed as well. While open sourcing algorithms might not be practically feasible as they are proprietary, to the greatest extent possible, algorithms should be visible to people. This means that at the very least, explainability is a reasonable expectation from big corporations and the algorithms that they use.
As has been established, knowing, probing, and correcting systems based on algorithms is important to individuals and society at large in a digital age. Research into building new systems and transforming existing systems to be explainable and interpretable, and with scope for correction, is increasingly important. Also, discussion on regulation and policy regarding these needs to happen quickly and with the involvement of all stakeholders. The right to know the algorithm in a digital society is akin to the right to information in a democracy. It is paramount for transparency, responsibility, and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I am sure we all had a lot to learn from it. Now, we will be having the panel discussion led by Dr. Kanksha Nathani, who is the Assistant Professor in the Human Sciences Research Center, IIIT Hyderabad. I would like to welcome our panelists. First up, we have Usha Ramanathan. Usha Ramanathan works on the jurisprudence of law, poverty, and rights. She is a visiting faculty member at various universities such as Azim Premji University in Bangalore, Nalsar and Mahindra University, Hyderabad, National Law University, Delhi, and Institute of Law at Nirma, Ahmedabad. She is often called upon by the National Judicial Law Academy in Bhopal and Delhi Judicial Academy to address judges on various issues of law and poverty, and on technology and the law. She was awarded Access Now's Human Rights Heroes Award in 2019. Next up, we have Tanveer Hassan. Tanveer Hassan AK is the Executive Director of the Center for Internet and Society, Bengaluru. Previously, Tanveer worked at the Wikimedia Foundation, leading global alliances for the free and open knowledge movement and resource allocation in South Asia. Finally, we also have with us Krishna Ravi Srinivas. Krishna Ravi Srinivas is an adjunct professor at Nalsa University of Law, Hyderabad, and a consultant with research and information system in developing countries. At Nalsar, he does research and teaches law, technology, and regulation, including AI regulation. He was a Fulbright Fellow at the University of Pennsylvania, a visiting scholar at Indiana University, Bloomington, a postdoctoral fellow at South Central Geneva, and visiting faculty at IIM Bangalore.
Thank you, Sujal, for the introduction. And first of all, welcome all of you in the Triple IT for this panel discussion. Just to tell you what this panel discussion is all about, the idea is to discuss the complexities and the implications of the right to be given some kind of interpretation, some kind of explanation when there is an outcome that is coming out of algorithmic decision-making processes. And the idea also is to focus on certain case studies in which there might be significant impact on an individual's life. We have students and faculty members who work in the similar area, and we also have the partners from industry looking at the similar areas. So let's provoke some research questions and concerns for them when it comes to algorithmic decision-making processes. So just to begin with, we can start on this note that in any functional democracies, the authorities should be able to explain the decision they take. So the bank should be able to explain the decision on a loan application, or the courts should be able to explain their decision on a bail application. So how do we, now we see the algorithms are being used for, these kind of activities. We know that they're being used for, in the hiring activities, in, the college applications, the rentals, the bail applications, what kind of, shows and movies you're supposed to watch. So all kind of things that's happen around us, which our students were also talking about, they are somehow, driven by the algorithms. So in that context, I think we should start the conversation first with, why should we know, what exactly should we know, how much we know, and, what could be the frameworks with which we should be looking at these questions. Specifically, if we want to highlight the focus, we might keep in ethical, legal, public policy, constitutional perspectives, if we want to, see these concepts from these perspectives. So let us start with you, Usha, first. You have been at the forefront of this, social and critical understanding of digital ID-based public infrastructure. So tell us what got you into this, and what are the key takeaways from your experience which should be, used in setting the agenda in such a conversation?
Thank you. Thanks. I think it was very useful to have the students speak first and to know how they are thinking about this, what kind of anticipation they have, what is it that they see themselves as witnessing. And like my friend there was saying, being in Hyderabad, when you talk about predictive policing and you talk about policing and how much of data and algorithms are being used by the police in Hyderabad, I think it'll be a good exercise for people to go around and look at, what it has come to mean. So when you ask me what it is that drove me to this, or drew me to it, it did drive me to it, but it also drew me to it. In the initial instance, it is that I belong to a generation that spent a lot of time thinking about civil liberties. And part of that was also recognizing that the state is an entity that is supposed to work for a people. And as a constitutional scholar, if I may call myself that, I couldn't find another word immediately, recognizing that it is the state that is limited by the constitution and not the rights of the people that are limited. It's a very simple formulation for us, where we say that the fundamental rights in our constitution is not about the power of the state, it is actually the rights of the people, and it limits the power of the state. Over a period of time, I've also been working on business and human rights, and I find that there is a kind of relationship that has developed between states and corporations, and therefore, economically very strong entities get in with politically very strong entities, and that leaves the people as the third turf who are really not guarded at all. So this is what was the starting point. But if I can just say a few things in the context that you have set, fortunately it provoked me to think along those lines, so I've got a few things just so that I don't waste time on it. The first thing is I'm glad that this is a conference of some kind, battering of minds. And the reason is, I think in technology, I hear much too often the word evangelizing, that you will produce the technology and then you will evangelize it, which is basically saying we'll tell you all that you want to hear, and if you don't like what you hear, we'll put fear into you, and we'll make sure that you're part of this anyway. And I think that we need to shed that, at least here, and confront uncomfortable questions. The second thing that I'll say is that it's very interesting when these generations of technology kind of took flight, meaning took wing. I mean, they didn't take flight. I wish they'd taken flight and gone away, but they haven't. They've taken wing, and so they are everywhere. It came at a time when civil society had worked very hard to get ourselves a Right to Information Act. And in 2005, we finally got ourselves a central law on the right to information. And what that right to information did was to say that people have a right to a transparent state. Then these technologies came in, and UID, of course, was in the forefront of all of this, which began to say that it's not state, it's not people who have state power, it's not people who have economic power, it's not people who have bureaucratic power of various kinds who are wrongdoers. It is people. People are corrupt, people are inefficient, leakage is produced because of the way in which people function. So we need to keep people under watch. And the UID project was very plainly from the beginning saying that it's going to be about plugging leakage. This was just a marketing strategy, but how did they market it? That we're going to plug leakage by putting every person on a database and then tracking them. We'll know where you are. It has to become ubiquitous. It has to become universal. Words like this were bandied about like they did not have any impact on anything other than just putting people on a database. So this inverted the idea of the right to information, and which basically meant that it's not about the state being transparent to people. And we have actually seen that the state gets more and more opaque. I think the electoral bonds is one classic case of speaking transparency while producing opacity. And it being opaque even today, even after the Supreme Court order and even after you've put it up on a website, it's still opaque because opacity has been so built into it. So this inversion is something that I think should concern all of us. I'll just say one or two more things and then keep the rest for later. I think the other thing is I'm working on something which I call the philosophy for technology, not of technology. We've seen what the philosophy of technology is, and it's not a very pretty thing. So when you think of philosophy for technology, there are some things that you need to dislodge. And one of those is that there is a brilliant way in which these generations of technology are constantly telling us that we are inadequate. Human beings are inadequate. The only way that you can upgrade the human being is by an interface with a machine. And what you cannot do, you don't worry about. We'll hand it over to the machine will deal with it. So this is the third thing. And the fourth thing that I'll say before I stop is that I don't think we can start talking about algorithms without seeing where that data is coming from. We know that when the internet, when Google started doing what it was doing, when many other companies came in, when Microsoft started doing what it was doing, what Amazon does, what all these big guys who supposedly, at least in the initial phases, gave us things for free but ended up with a lot of money, heaven knows where from, you find that they collected our data without our even knowing it was happening, and they converted us into all manner of products. But this did not only produce profit, it dislodged in the many struggles that people have had to make sure that power doesn't get centralized. And this again began to produce control and power with those who already had, who already had it. So this link between the state and the corporation, and each helping the other, is one of the dangers that I think we now have. And it's come because the state has used all its might to coerce, in the Indian context for sure, to coerce all of us. This is the later stages. Initial stages, they collected without our all the companies collected it, and then you have states stepping in and saying, we will make people get onto databases. We will help you make people become data. And then we'll see what we do with you. The rest of the imagination I'll keep for a little while later.
Yeah, very rightly said. So I would like to pick from when you said that human beings are not educated and how leakages will be fixed with the technologies and all. So Tanveer, what we see today when it comes to algorithmic decision making, one of the major arguments seems to be that at least they are less discriminatory and less biased than human beings. If you feed them the correct data sets, they'll be able to take decisions which are, less biased and more objective. So let's start talking about the bias. I mean, number of research that have pointed out, sampling bias and the prejudice bias and the confirmation bias that is now visible in the algorithm-driven platforms. I just want to, talk about one or two case studies and then want to know your opinion on this. Like this Google's photo app, the facial recognition app, still can't recognize gorillas because 8 years ago there was this controversy that happened that they were mislabeling black people, as gorillas. I mean, there have been reports that have come out that how Google and LinkedIn are, showing prestigious job ads, targeted advertising only to men and, not to women. There have been cases where, there was this recent case that came up where an MIT graduate, she asked a AI-driven platform to change her headshot into a professional headshot, and it made her skin, fairer and the eyes blue and the gray hair to just convert it into a headshot. So we see, all kind of these kind of things keep happening. Now we know that these algorithms are now being used, let's say, for your asylum application. And the reports have come up that in the Afghan, asylum crisis, they're being used to assess how you walk, how you talk, and what are the translations that can happen to understand what you're trying to say. And there are mistakes in these translations. So how do you see the whole bias questions, in this context, and the argument that they are, less biased and less discriminatory when it comes to human beings?
First of all, I don't think that's a valid argument at all. Let me explain why. I think bias is a word that has been taken up by technology, and it has been somehow decoded and put into a large set of technological marvels and success that technology has created for itself. And then as a second thought or as an afterthought said, oh, but we also have bias. We have done all of this. We have built highways, we have built supercomputers. Oh, but there is also bias. So it's always an afterthought when you talk about it, and which is unfair, because if you were to talk about a political system, you would not want to talk about a political system without talking about bias, without talking about privilege. So why does bias become a footnote in the conversation of technology is probably one of the first ways to peel off that rather intricate question. But there's something else that you pointed out, and I was thinking about it. The necessity for anybody with power to provide an explanation is an intrinsic right of a particular engagement. You are powerful, you have knowledge, you have wisdom, any kind of power. Knowledge is also power, right? So it is intrinsic and it is imperative on your end to provide that explanation. But what we have seen over a period of time is that it's no longer about explanation, it's about information. So you have a lot of information. Take it at the judicial system, take it at the financial systems, take it at the conversations of academia. What we now are looking is this massive source of information that comes to us with a very limited way of explaining things. So when you don't explain, or when you don't put in an attempt to explain, a lot of these sub-questions, which are very important and interesting, but they're sub-questions because you're not explaining them. Bias is one of it. And also deployability becomes important, right? The minute you pick out a question like bias, it is one of those important conversations that is going to stop your marketing idea, marketing agenda. It is going to limit your resources. It's going to limit your revenue. So why would you want to talk about a question that is so central to your scalability, to your idea of looking at things that will make some of your concepts probably get probed and analyzed and advised in a very different and a very critical aspect? This is also a question that we have to think about, because the bias question does not only come in humanitarian aspects. Yes, the asylum question is important. The students who are talking about also pulled up a very important question of law and order. The bias question can be at any other level as well. The bias question could also come in at the level of well-being. Is bias always linked to pain? Is bias always linked to discrimination? Bias can be at a level that we don't acknowledge at this point as well. And if you look at the opacity that is built in, I just want to take a cue from Usha, the social media platforms that we have seen was somehow designed in such a way that it was full of opacity. For the simple reason that transparency was not the first objective of the social media. It was connectivity. It was this idea of getting connected people, ensuring that a lot of ideas, I mean, it is their ideas, not everybody's ideas. But when you are pursuing a particular notion, or when you're pursuing a particular rhetoric, questions, topics, ideas that don't fall into your narrative are usually put into a box. And that black box seems to be ever growing for technology. And there will come a point of time when we'll not only talk about all of the shining modules, what the technology has done, and what all tools that we have built, but we will be focusing the conversation around that black box. It's just that criticality should not become like we are anti-technology. If we now talk about it, it's a healthy conversation of saying, hey, look, we come from a different background, we come from a different point of view, we come from a different domain knowledge, and hence we ask these questions. Tomorrow, if it comes to a point of, oh, now I come from humanities, or now I'm coming from languages, and that's the reason why I'm questioning technology, it's a very lose-lose situation for the growth of technology and for the growth of humanity, so to say.
Right. So at this point, I would like to, talk about the Samagra Vedika, the algorithmic software used by Telangana government. And there was a Supreme Court decision that came on it to, relook into all the applications that were rejected by the algorithms for the food, subsidies that were given. So what happens in this software for past several years, the software consolidates the government database into, of different schemes, and it makes a consolidated profile of an individual to assess the eligibility for the different, services and the subsidies that can be taken by these people. So now what happens that the algorithm starts tagging, false information to some specific cases, and that becomes, that makes them, out of that excludes them from that, welfare program that is run by the state. Now, this case goes to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court orders that 1.9 billion such million applications have to be, relooked. There has to be field verification that has to happen by a human being into it. And last we checked, there are around 2 lakh applications that have been looked into, and already there's a 7.5% error. Now we are talking about a country where 1% means 1.5 billion people. So 1% means 1.5 million people. Sorry. So in that context, tell us, Ravi, how do we see the existing legal constitutional frameworks to be applicable in such situations? Do we have appropriate frameworks, or do we need now a new set of frameworks to relook into such cases?
Thanks for the opportunity. I think one of the major issues here is many of the systems were built without any safeguards, without any legal, looking at the rights and responsibilities. You can look at it both ways. First of all, the state has got the responsibility as something that guarantees or something that provides to ensure that whatever the system it builds, it's foolproof, or if you fail somewhere or there is some technical glitch, there is something else to fall back upon. Take the question of ration, or it is, ration, whether it is ration or health or education or whatever it is. Unfortunately, that has not been built in. One major issue here is we did not do any pilot testing for any of the systems. They were just brought in, they were just thrust upon. Second, as one of us would know, that when we want to do something build, whether it is Aadhaar, whether it is whatever it is, we should also look into the potential issues which could arise on account of technical glitches, on account of combination of various factors. But the constitutional aspect of that, state is supposed to be taking care of all that. Now, if you look at constitutions evolved at a time when these type of technologies were not thought, and we were totally clueless in the sense that constitution can only talk about rights. Constitution can talk about limitations, reasonable limitations, and constitution can take what the state can do, the limitations of what the state should do in that. But to translate that into technology terms, if you talk of algorithm, it would only mean that you have the responsibility to ensure that what you provide through algorithms does not affect the fundamental right of any citizen in any way unless it falls within that. For example, if you want to restrict freedom of expression using algorithm or whatever the criteria you want to use, then whether it is reasonable restriction, all those things have to be built in, but those things are not at all there. And when it comes to critical needs like education, health, or for that matter, even essentials like water or anything, the moment you try to link population registers, Aadhaar cards, biometric and everything, there is a whole, whether you call it 360 or 720 or whatever it is, there's a whole lot of black boxes sitting here, linkage is missing here, and then the whole huge potential for algorithms taking things wrongly, it gets added up. The problem here is that the system itself becomes a huge black box and designed by someone else, by a team or whatever it is, implemented by the state without any legislative discussion on them or without any legal backing for them. More importantly, what is happening is that we are not looking into any good way, how do we ensure that privacy enhancing can be done by technology? How can we ensure that some of these things can be mitigated through technology? For example, if you take up algorithm can be audited like any system audit. Algorithms can be audited by stakeholders before put to use. Like if I'm testing a beta of software, I put it to use the whole lot of users and then ask them. But these things are not being done. So the problem is not just that of law, it is also the problem of administrative thinking, and the problem is the way whole system works. One way to correct is that I think professors like Usha can tell me. We need to bring in a separate set of constitutional amendments to ensure that technology does not override our fundamental rights in any way. Second thing I think we also need to look into is that appropriate acts should be required. For example, if you're linking Right to Food Act or Right to whatever Education Act, then we should bring something like technology-oriented safeguards, technology-oriented exemptions, and then technology-oriented linkages there. For example, Right to Food Act, there should be a specific section which says that on no ground the right to food should not be denied for faulty technology or for want of some record or to failure to fulfill some criteria. So we need to build in those safeguards. Then comes an important question. See, this is a problem which we all know as lawyers who are dealing with technology. There are two aspects of that. I'll come to them later now. First thing is the pacing problem. The pacing problem is technology gallops, law simply walks, society simply walks. So how do we address that? In case of algorithms, you can do it through algorithmic audits. You can do it through a way that, you think about the regulation, you think about the human right aspect, socio-economic aspects, and then even a human-oriented technology assessment before you build systems. Second dilemma is what we know as the Coolidge dilemma. Coolidge dilemma simply states, if you try to restrict technology too much in the beginning, it will fail. It won't get propagated, innovations won't happen, or technology won't get adopted at all. But when you try to regulate it at a much larger scale, at a later stage, it becomes too frequent, it is all around everywhere, and then you are not even able to do anything about it. So we need to find some way out of that. One way to go about is that look at technology from a very critical human rights perspective, from the user's perspective in a different way, but also ensure that technology development, technology regulation, and are not something that is left to technocrats or just to bureaucrats. We need to bring in a totally different aspect of technology regulation that also looks into technology development as well. Some of us have been working on the European concept of responsible research and innovation, where we factor some of these things like public engagement, ethics. Then instead of right to know, we say that public understanding and gender. And so 4 or 5 keys we are trying to locate, identify as to how we bring in them. In the Indian context, my work on this has been that which RIS also have been working is that bring in access, equity and inclusion framework in technology development as well as deployment. We can develop some of these concepts in a very contextual way for algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Now, Usha, of course, I want you to respond to what Ravi said, what kind of constitutional amendments we need now, but also, locate this whole understanding within the existing RTI frameworks. Like, are these frameworks good enough to address, or do we need to rethink from the beginning just to be able to make sure that the algorithmic decision making does not violate any person's, at least the fundamental human rights? And one more thing that I want you to address is this, that we are not just talking about the governments, we're also talking about the big tech platforms over here who have significant impact on an individual's life, can play a very important role in determining your needs, choices, preferences. So how do you see that, all of these debates within the existing RTI frameworks?
I'm sorely tempted to start with your last question, but not necessarily addressing it the way you've asked it. When you open the papers or you open a magazine and you see that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are saying, I'm going to have a boxing match with you, or I don't know. And I'm like, these guys are so undeveloped. Maybe they are brilliant in some kinds of ways. They know how to, deal with tech. And then when I meet my tech friends, I'm looking at them to see, are these guys okay? Are they fully developed? Have all parts of their brain developed? Is something dying even as they do tech? So it's a very strange. And then another fellow says, Jeff Bezos, I'll go to Mars, let all the dirty factories be here, I'll set up a settlement there. And I'm like, these guys are not for real. And then I think that these chaps are the ones who reached in the past 20 years among the richest 10. 5, 6, 7 will be these people. And then they become the philanthropists and they decide what we need and how it should be given to us and how governments should act. It's a very strange world. So I don't think we can think about the development and growth of technology, without recognizing who these controllers of these technologies are. You have Musk going to Israel. He makes a stupid statement on social media, and then he has to go running to Israel and there to say that, if Hamas did this attack in the beginning, they only deserve to be killed. Who are you? When did you become, judge and executioner? So there is a lot of caution which goes, it's not just the technology that is being produced. It is whose imagination is this? What are they, what kind of power do they wield in the real world? And how, they are actually presenting themselves as super gods. So I'm unable to get that. I don't wish to forget this when I'm thinking about all of this. Also, the artificial intelligence. I've been reading so many articles of late, and I'm thinking, what is this? Because everyone's telling me it is neither artificial nor intelligence. And this is true. The more you read them, the more you realize that it is neither artificial and certainly not intelligence. So all of this is coming from data that is coming from people. And I forget whether it was IBM or one of the other companies which was doing facial recognition technologies. And they found that there were many errors in it, so which they had, of course, given to the police, because that's the first people who will test it on everyone. So they'd given it to them, and they were getting a lot of errors. And they said, actually, it's the amount of data we have is inadequate. If everyone in the globe goes on and gives all their photographs and everything is available to us, we can give you a perfect system. So they ask us to work very hard, to have ourselves surveilled and to lose all our rights. It's a strange world we live in. So technology is not producing sanity. It's producing insanity. So this is, and I was actually very interested when the students were presenting and she said, all of us have this phone, the first time we look at it, and then we do GPS and we do this, that, and the other. And I was thinking, I was listening to her carefully and saying, okay, I've done none of this. And my life is great. So why do we have to think that without these which is what we are being asked to think, that without these technologies, we are missing out on life. And over a period of time, it is being so mandated that we can't survive without these, if we have to just be there in the civic world. Which is actually an answer to, part answer to what you're saying. See, everyone, all the poor who are going, all those who are dependent on welfare, who are going to the ration shops, are being told that they have to keep something about them perfect so that they can interface with the system. Either you should have your fingerprint, I don't know if you've seen that there's a fingerprint authentication document that came out in 2012 from the UIDAI, and on page 19, because it's so stuck in my head because it was so strange. They talk about fingerprint authentication, and then they say, first you go and enroll yourself, then you go for best finger detection test, and when you do that, you figure out which your best finger is, and then I don't know if invertedly or otherwise, they have this finger, where they have a bow tied on it. A picture, just a sketch with a bow tied on this finger to say, be careful with the finger when it will work for biometrics. Because if it ceases to work, then you're in trouble. So a manual worker is told that you need to be careful not to allow anything to happen to this finger because otherwise you may not be able to get your rations. It is what Ravi said. It's not just that they were not tested. You're absolutely right. We all noticed that there were no pilots, there were decisions. There were decisions to roll out certain technologies in our midst. And that there were no pilots and these decisions were made was, in my understanding, they knew that many of these things won't work. It will be imperfect. But let's go as far as we can. Whole populations have become the experimental laboratory for these technologies. Technology in the early 2000s, technology that was exciting, has become, the students, the presentation was so striking in that you can see that there are so many things wrong with it. And yet, why is it that we have to swear ourselves to this technology? So I don't think it's only about transparency for use. I think it is also transparency for questioning what this whole thing is about, which wants to overrun our world. And when we talk about biases, the biases are supposedly being produced by technology. More white people were on databases than black people. Black people were only on criminal databases. They didn't bother to put them on any other databases. This idea that the way to be, that is, if you have to be recognized as a person in existence, you have to be represented in databases, is something that they've brought to us. But we also know, and this is what the Supreme Court decision also says, and we see that everywhere. We saw that when it came to GST, income tax, where they send faceless, they use the faceless technique to send out messages, and they found that the algorithms were just producing large numbers. Everyone was getting all manner of, notices. So they said, all right, let it do the first job of saying there are whatever, hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people or whatever. Then we'll put a human being there. The human being will sift and say, Acha, send it to this one, don't send it to that. So ultimately, I felt that even as we are being told that we are dumb and the machine is brilliant, and that's where the intelligence question comes in, actually the machine is ultimately turning to us for intelligence. It may overrun us otherwise. And like I heard a conversation that was happening where they said, so long as it is algorithm of this kind, it's one thing to say, is it the human being or not? But when it becomes machine learning, we won't even know what the algorithm is. And when it is run away like that, we have seen some of the things that can happen. You worry, this is a world where in the past 70 years, we've seen 75 years, we've at least seen 3 times where we are warned about human extinction. It happened when they dropped the bomb. It happened when CERN said that they wanted to check the Big Bang. It is happening now when the techies who are producing this are saying this could be the beginning of human extinction. I am not going to make a case for human beings to be on this earth forever, because when I read the Anthropocene debates, I wonder whether it's time for us to leave. But I don't think I want to leave it in the hands of technology controllers and creators to decide when human beings, whether human beings survive or go extinct.
Right, Tanvi, so let's continue this conversation on human in the loop, if that is, the solution that is mostly being proposed by, let's say, European Union to some extent. And in the case of Samagra Vedika, we also saw that, Supreme Court says that put a human being for a field verification to see if the algorithmic decision making is correct or not. Now, in one of the RTI response, I think it was filed by the Internet Freedom Foundation, it came out that even the Delhi police, the software that they are using in the RTI response, they have said that it's 80% accurate. And the report and the title of the report was that the Delhi police claim that the 80% accuracy is 100% scary, because somehow if you have matched 80% with the potential criminal, the onus is on you to then prove that you're not the right person. So what do you have to say about this human in the loop solution coming from, let's say, the Europe and the other countries, that this is one way to tackle the problems that we are facing out of algorithmic decision making?
This might come across as a very irreverential response, but hear me out. I think when you say human is in the loop, it's also a dismissive way of establishing technology as a superpower, right? Which means that we will do everything, and then if something goes wrong, you come in and repair it for us, which is the first part of it. The second part of it is, if you look at the way that AI, for the lack of a better term, the larger generative technology is working into our systems, it is doing at all of the levels that are integral to us for human life, not for any other part. For example, I'll give you the thing. It's taking over all of our financial conversations. Like, some of us are not on UPI, fine, but it still is a very, very important part of our finance life. It is taking over a lot of our education part of it. It is taking over a lot of our entertainment part. It is slowly taking over some part of our legal and regulatory compliances as well. So everything of importance for us is now coming into a conversation with AI, which doesn't know what exactly is the language to speak with. So with so many defects, with so many, even if it is not called a defect, even if there were, let's be fair and say that scope for improvement, would you want to do this with a human element? Would you want to run a human system with such scope of improvement and at such scale? Is a simple question that we have to ask to understand the way that we are leaning towards technology in this debate. That is a bias. The bias that we spoke about, if it has to be established, it has to be established not only at the level of the cases, it has to be established at the level of the value. I'll give you another example. Most of the research that is done around AI and technology revolves around the three fundamental aspects that are crucial to the interest of it. The first one is risk. The second one is regulation. The third one is revenue. Like, most of the research that happens around generative technology can be bundled across this. Now, if I were to flip a question, and I'm doing this purely based on my training, if I were to say, we'll remove the risk, revenue, and regulation, and we'll put integrity, impact, and insight, how much of that research would come back to me? How much of that research will speak to me? So the fundamental question that we started discussing of bias is not only a bias about a particular set of conversations. It's not about black versus white. It's not about asylum versus settlers. It's not only about people with higher quotient of per capita with a lower quotient of per capita. It is about the way that we are looking at technology and we are giving those archetypal questions. So if we don't make the archetypal questions only speak to, or rather, sorry, let me reframe it. If we are making the archetypal questions come only from technology, the answers are also going to come only towards technology. So there needs to be an intervention, and that intervention can't be the switch that we are talking about the human loop or about the interference or about an intervention. It has to be a collaboration. It has to be a co-design. It has to be a conversation.
Right. So, Ravi, on this note, I think it's a good time to talk about the whole global, I would call a dilemma between the ex-ante regulations and ex-post regulations over it. Like, should we be predicting what might go wrong and make regulatory frameworks in advance, or should we just wait and watch how thing goes and then, step into regulating these technologies? Simply put forward, like, I mean, when you go for the regulating algorithm-based technologies, is it too early and too much versus too late and too little? So how do you see this, debate emerging in which, of course, the global power struggle also gets into?
This export ante versus exposed is a old question in many senses. Yeah, for the simple reason, in some of these things, you can do ex ante, you can also do exposed, but question comes at what level of ex ante you want to do it, and then what level exposed you do it. One of the ways to look at is that people talk about, okay, let us do some regulatory sandboxes, let us do some of these things pre-tested and then tested at a different scale, or do that. But the other way to look at this is that before going into exposed or ex ante, is to thoroughly check the very beginning itself. For example, today it may not be very fashionable, but at one point of time, there was a thing called technology assessment, which looked at many of these things even before you do it. And now, today it's also possible, there are new concepts like value-based designs or value-based technology development, where some of these things can be brought in. For example, when I talk of value-based design or value-based technology development, I inbuilt, okay, this technology should not infringe upon privacy, or it should be privacy enhancing, or it should enhance the user's options better than giving them a black box. So before thinking of ex post and ex ante, we can also think at the level of technology development, technology design itself. Then I think it would make sense to go from that to technology development and then to go to ex post and ex ante. The third idea, which is that there are a whole lot of ideas about regulatory sandboxes which are being tried, which is really good. I mean, I am someone who would really support it, because had these sandboxes been in place, many of the things which we face now could have been solved or could have been anticipated, and then something could have been done. But more than that, what we need is governance. The idea of governance of technology is more important. So for that, one concept which has been put is called anticipatory governance. Anticipatory governance says, if you are going to talk of technology development, deployment for a globally or nationally or whatever it is, you first anticipate that certain things are inevitable, certain things will happen, involve the stakeholders, and then pace the technology development, pace the technology adoption, and more importantly, stakeholder engagement should be there right from the beginning. See, one of the issues which Europeans have been always facing or always trying to address is that they talk about public engagement in science technology, citizen science. They want to take a lot of inputs from different stakeholders and then try to bring in them. And some of these debates have influenced the EU's policy towards AI Act as well. At the same time, EU has also had a lot of very disastrous experiences with some of the technologies like GM technology. So, there also you are facing the same problem, whether it is ex ante or ex post, what do we do with that? One way is that fine, we can do the ex ante and then see we can do certain things, try to extrapolate and do it later, then do ex post. But in case of some of the technologies like algorithm and AI, the real problem is that the results you will get from ex ante may not be sufficient, and by the time you do an ex post, it will be just too much. In the sense that the results on hand are good for you to know, but not sufficient as to how to decide about it. If by chance an ex ante says this AI system is good, it is worth replicable across, and the moment you do it a massive replication, but then you realize that certain things were unanticipated, and in systems where there are a lot of black boxes, unanticipated consequences, and then untested hypotheses, or come to think of it, the knowns, unknowns, unknowable unknowns, then it becomes really problematic. So yes, I do agree, we do need to think of ex ante and ex post, but I think the time has come to think beyond them as well. Thank you.
Yes.
Also, in addition to what Ravi is saying, regulation is made by the state. And the state now has a stake, it's a stake that has been offered to it by technology providers, technology creators and providers, where they are sharing the power of the state and the potential that technology is producing, so that the business interest will make their profits, and the state will have control over all people. In this kind of, if you take, I was just thinking, because if you take EU and you take the US and you take India, EU started with saying, and they've continued with saying, that human rights are important. So somewhere you start thinking from the perspective of human rights. Technology makes it very difficult. The current generation of technology makes it very difficult, yet they make a serious effort to see that there is a certain respect that is given to human rights. The US is a business-oriented state. So for them, laissez-faire works. And it is only when they themselves, when their congressmen feel threatened, that they will have some kind of a question at least that's asked. And there are a few ethical people, a few people within that who look for ethics. And therefore, you will have them raising questions about monopolies and antitrust and all the rest of it. In the Indian context, the Indian state seems to think that it owns the people. So it can demand anything of the people, and you cannot deny it. You can deny it on pain of punishment. For instance, there were times when they told us, if you don't link up your UID with your bank account, we'll freeze your bank account. Where they get that power from, heaven alone knows. So, and everything gets criminalized if you don't get onto the system. So you'll be punished for it. But the system itself will never get punished for all the errors that it is doing. It's always the person. So there is this control element that's been brought in, which is how in a country like this, we are able to have the DNA, Criminal Law Amendment Act, which introduced the collection of DNA from any person who's picked up, arrested, and then, up to 1 year, if it can be punished, you can compulsorily and coercively, a constable, I think, can ensure that they take your DNA, put it on a database, which can be held up to 75 years. And, the statement of 75 years in that is telling us how cynical they are about the people of this country. So I don't know that in this kind of, and they have what they call a non-personal data protection framework. And they start introducing that. What is non-personal about it? It's about my personal data, which is going to be converted, which is going to be used in multiple ways. They say personal data becomes non-personal if it's already in the public domain or if it can be anonymized. I think anonymization is one of those great myths that those who create algorithms work with, because they need the myth. It can be so easily de-anonymized, especially in the system where you have to put that information in so many databases that anonymity is lost even when you begin. So you deperson the person and convert them into data and say, it's mine now. And the state says, I will share it. I will say who can share it. It can be transferred. It can be used in multiple ways. Because we want also, among other things, apart from control, we wanted to contribute to the making of a big economy. So it's about economy, and it's not about people anymore. So in that context, I don't know what expectation I can have from regulation.
Right. So Tanvi, let us talk about another dichotomy that's being created between high stakes and low stakes. And I would refer to a research which has recently been published in the Big Data and Society, where they talk about this simple stakes thesis, and they offer this interesting argument. And they say that for even if the stakes associated with a specific one-off decision are low, and hence does not engender a right to an explanation, such decisions may nevertheless form part of a high-stakes pattern or, aggregate of decisions. So how would you address that, kind of dichotomy that is being presented in front of us to address with algorithmic decision-making?
I'm trying to think of a reference to this. The high-stakes question is not, again, this is like the...
I'll tell you the example they added. They said that, let's say it's a job. So stakes might be different for different people, right? How much the stakes are involved if you want to get that job. You can't put them in one category.
True, but what I was trying to explain was that none of these, or all of these conversations are not about technology. They're using technology as a signifier of some kind. So even in this case, when you're talking about the high stake is only a referential value to what has been assigned to it. And now that assigning is both a social construct and a technical construct or a technology construct. The social construct we have been able to decode it. For example, you do X, Y, and Z, and you know A, 1, 2, and 3, and you learn A, B, and C. These are the ways that you approach it. But the technology construct is something that is completely, it continues to baffle us. I'll give you an example. if you were to look at the earlier conversation that we were having, it is not about regulation alone. I completely agree with Usha. But it is not only also about rights, it also is about values. The values question doesn't seem to have a logical ground when it comes to technology, because the inherent understanding of technology is that people who create technology are liberal, are progressive people. So what wrong can come with that idea? When I am a liberal, when I'm a progressive, when I believe in all of the human rights and values, and I espouse and I'm an ambassador for it, how does it not get translated into my technology? How does it not get translated into the application that I build or the tool that I create? So what is missing here is the stakes question, is that when you look at technological idea and then you start breaking it down from your idea to your application, there is a whole spectrum of life that happens. Now you might call it the life cycle of an AI, or you might just call it the life cycle of a social idea. When you are unable to explain it to the person who is going to be at the end user level, now there is a whole technical term to it which is called an upstream, and then there is a model, then there is a downstream. When these three models, or when these three terms, or when these three models of engagement don't speak to the idea of values, you are going to have those classifications, you are going to have those distinctions of what is a high stake and what is a low stake and what might not even be considered as a stake. Like I said, why is wellness not important to us? Why do we have to look into an app of white noise to sleep well, to put our babies to sleep? I don't know how many of you do this, but a lot of my friends, when we became parents 2 years ago, a lot of our parents, a lot of my friends instantly recommended, switch on, get yourself a white noise app, your baby will sleep well. We're like, no, we don't want to do it.
Right. So, Ravi, because we are running short of time, I had two questions, but I'll stick to one. Is how do we see the frameworks in an umbrella, kind of situation? Can there be any umbrella framework, or there has to be, detailed sector specific regulations that we would need to address such kind of concerns that are constantly emerging?
One way to address is that fundamentally we need to look at what values, what ethical things, and then more importantly, what's the objective we really want to fulfill. If you want to develop a very comprehensive umbrella framework, that is good. Want to do something sectoral, that's also equally good. But whole question will come on two grounds. One, how anticipatory, how effective will be your framework the way technology grows. That is one thing which is very fundamental. So the framework has got some agility, has got some inbuilt feature that can anticipate, can do certain things, even if it should be flexible enough for that. Second question is that some of the things like privacy, very important value, and then some of the things which we want to protect, like fundamental rights. And then it's also equally important when we talk of privacy, fundamental rights, and ethical application of technology. It is first of all necessary that we talk or think in terms of some concepts like algorithmic justice. And then we need to bring in a whole lot of not just concepts but also ideas inbuilt when we develop these frameworks. For example, the traditional regulatory framework idea will no longer work because it is again top down. Again, it thinks that the regulation is the best mode, and then regulation always is more command and control or one authority or a centralized one. But we need to think more in terms of frameworks that are not, one would say that single-centric, polycentric frameworks that are more agile, more stakeholder engagement friendly, but with some clear-cut objectives. For example, if I'm going to develop a AI application for educational technology or health, then it is important that I need to have stakeholder involvement and engagement at all levels. But it's also equally important that it needs to ensure that I do not treat stakeholders as mere as data providers or merely as guinea pigs or merely people whom I use to test certain things. There should be stakeholders with some dignity, some respect, some value, and then with some rights. So if some framework can be developed taking into these things, it will be perfect, but I really don't know as to whether it is an utopian idea or whether really we can develop some new concepts and practices that can incorporate some of these things. Thank you.
All right, so maybe last 1 or 2 minutes each to all of you. What I really want you to tell us students, what are the research questions that they should now be focusing on? What are the areas that are completely missing from the discourse, and how should they incorporate, these concerns into the research that they're doing while developing, deploying, AI based systems? So maybe let's start with you, Usha.
Now that you're giving me that minute, I'll just say a couple of things more too. One is your statement about, after all, they are liberal, what wrong could they do? I think the Indian experience has completely exploded that myth. Mr. Nilekani walks into government, tells the government how to create surveillance systems and control systems. So the idea that the state should be off is nowhere in the technology scene in India. It is entirely by getting the coercive power of the state to act for the technologists. So the technologists want to be free and liberated from the state, but to use the state for mandating things on other people. Second quick thing is that, and this is just a caution which was given to me when I was talking to a philosopher about, about the philosophy for technology. And I was saying, in science, it doesn't come to me to say that you shouldn't be curious about anything. After all, science is about curiosity. It's about knowledge. How can you say that you shouldn't seek knowledge? What you do with that knowledge may be different. And he said, actually, I'm not sure that I would agree with you as a philosopher. I would say not all curiosity is okay. When you said values, he said, the way in which you would value this, the way in which you would think about curiosity will be on the value that you attribute to that curiosity. So he said, that's why you fought the case against, the invasion of privacy. You don't know, nobody has. So a scientist who sees herself as moving towards understanding and explaining nature is a very different thing. That kind of curiosity may go towards just the production of knowledge. But other kinds of curiosity which don't just result in the production of knowledge have to be treated differently. So then we were talking a little bit about CRISPR technology and what that means, and designer babies and all that kind of stuff. So I think it is all right to seek information from wherever, because we are, after all, seeking knowledge is not true. So I think it does need to be looked at every time. The third thing is, of course, the digital divide, which we didn't mention, but it was there implicit in our conversation. And in the context of algorithms particularly, I think the digital divide is far greater than anything else. I mean, you give it to a very literate person, maybe a leading economist somewhere, and they won't know what to do with the algorithm when you give it to them. So it is a very sector-specific, people who know it, who will be able to then interpret it, and then we have to depend upon these intermediaries. And you know what happens when you have intermediaries. You have lawyers. I mean, lawyers are intermediaries, and they complicate things even more for you. So that's one thing to caution. And the last thing that I'll say is that the word that we did not use, but which I think is, again, implicit in all of this, is innovation. That no matter what, innovation should not be stifled. I think this is another, hocus pocus that has to be dumped. For one thing, much of this is not innovating and producing knowledge, which we use. It is creating artifacts and products which are then used on people. So I think the idea that there has to be a valorizing of innovation over and above everything else, and like Ravi was saying, maybe we need to rewrite a constitution for that, and I don't think we need to rewrite our constitution. Our constitution is fine. Our technology creators and controllers are the problem. There is a way in which excitement can be brought back to technology. For that, the artifact has to be subservient to the human being. That's not where we are today.
Shall I quickly go? Okay. There are two ways of answering this question. One is really at that philosophical level, and one I'll try to be pedagogic at the level of pedagogy as well. So the philosophical level is pretty easy to think. The point that Usha was making about this whole argument that regulation stifles innovation, that because you regulate, we can't innovate. Because there are so many regulations, all of these opportunities are going away. I think that's a myth that needs to be. And what also happens is you are creating a very formalized option to build opacity into your technology. right? So just at that level. And the emerging conversations around what is trust in AI is also a beautiful concept to explore. Uh, because trust is so important, right? Trust at the level of finance is something else. Trust at the level of health is something else. Trust when it comes to law is something else. Trust when it comes to relationships and social construct is something else. So this whole idea of trustworthy AI or trust AI is, again, at a philosophical level, very interesting. But on a more pedagogic level, for students who want to probably pick this up and do their dissertations or something, there are some very useful resources. There's something that the Stanford team put together called a Foundation Model Transparency Index. If you have not come across this already, please take a look at it. They've done, I would want to say they've done a decent job. They have created 100 indicators that they have classified across 3 levels. The first level is upstream, which means what goes into creating these models. Not very surprisingly, it is about data, labor. And they have found, again, not very surprising, is that almost all of the foundational models that we have of AI are most non-transparent in this level, what goes into it, right? Their models and their downstream, they are much more transparent because there are already set laws which force them to do this. Whether it is the DSA, whether it is the EU law, it forces them to talk about what their systems are, what their functionality is, what business interest, where is it going, what is the data protection, what are the privacy things. So there is already a question that if you are not asked, you will not answer, which is the antithesis of transparency, which is the antithesis of collaboration and development, right? And just a quick statistic note on this, when the Stanford group put this study and they did this research across their 100 parameters, it will be very surprising to know that Llama of Facebook scored the highest in transparency. So it was Llama, which was built by Facebook, which is an open model, by the way. It scored the highest, and the highest was 54 of the 100 percentile. The lowest is 12, built by Amazon, right? And the average score is abysmal. The average is 37. So across all of the models, foundational models that we have, this is the average that we are talking about, 37. So in academic context, in very Indian academic context, it just pass. So you are trusting a technology that has just passed to create and to take life decisions for all of you or all of us. So that's the irony. That's the research that I was talking about. Last thing that I want to say and conclude is that the more conversations that we have about technology being a friend to us is a sweetener that we are having that is going to only push us into a risk. The more conversations that you're going to have about technology as an adversary, as an, I don't know, equal or worthy, but as an adversary, is what is going to help us answer, decode, and probably even face some of those challenges that come to us. Thanks.
Ravi?
Fundamentally, there are 2 things which I would like to address here. One is that as technology grows, as people may work on that, students, I think they are being young, they should be open in mind. In the sense that they should open up their mind to various ideas and various thoughts across fields, across disciplines, so that they get to know, okay, what is the current thing which will be more important for them. For example, the traditional curriculum may not talk in terms of values or ethics, but then it is high time they also learn about some of those aspects when they develop technology. Second thing is that in the whole RRI concept which we are talking, we also talk about something which is very important, which we call as reflexivity and anticipation. Reflexivity means that you don't take things granted, you all don't assume that you know everything. So you do some reflection, you step back and then say, okay, this is what. Then I also test again what all I have done, my assumptions, my basic hypothesis and everything, because I want to be responsible. Responsibility also brings in a lot of things that you don't take responsibility just as a simple way of taking boxes like that. It's a more philosophical, more one that is also oriented towards responsible for what, responsible towards what, and responsible to meet which objective. So anticipation means that you anticipate certain things, but you are also well prepared. Yes, certain things may go wrong. You also, when you reflect, when you do reflexivity, also reflects upon your what you know, what you don't know, and more importantly, you be what Sheila just now talked about, technologies of humility. So some sort of humility, some sort of awareness towards the unknowns, unknowable knowns, unknown unknowns, I think those things, if we take into account, students may find it more interesting and more challenging. Then there is a whole lot of new ideas of, how do we look at the development of technology, particularly if you go back, the debate which Norbert Wiener had, human use of human beings, or the way Joseph Weizenbaum responded after ELISA was used when the thing that someone was totally amazed by it, thought it to be too real. So you go back and then back and forth and see some of the things which we talked today have been reflected upon even earlier. And then when the 80s and a little later, we had this society called Computer Professionals for Social Responsibility, which also looked into some of the military technologies, anticipated certain things, and particularly this in the Star Wars context. So I think students should open up their minds to explore a lot of other interdisciplinary thinking and ideas. They should be able to really appreciate how some of the things which appear to be outlandish or some totally unrelated to what they have been taught may be really worthwhile when they develop technology and try to put for human use. Thank you.
Right. So on that note, I wouldn't like to inform you, all of you, because Ravi talked about value education. Value education is a very, one of the core programs that IIIT had taken since like quite a few number of years, where every student before graduating, they are put into different groups, smaller groups, and different faculty members come together and talk about value education. So yeah. On that note, thank you very much. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot from the inputs that you have provided, and our students will, be able to take a lot of benefit out of the insights that you have given. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank all the panelists for the insights. It certainly left each of us with much to ponder about. I would now like to call upon Professor P.J. Narayanan and Dr. Radhika Krishnan, Program Coordinator of CHD at HSRC, to felicitate our panelists. Thank you all for coming to the inaugural address. I'm sure there is a lot to learn and look forward. Finally, I would like to call upon the chair of R&D Showcase, Dr. Aftab Hussain, to tell us what we have to look forward and give the vote of thanks.
Thank you. I'll do it the other way around. Let me thank everybody first. All the panelists. It was a very engrossing, very entertaining, and actually very insightful panel, and very timely as well, because like the students also pointed out, we are surrounded by algorithms everywhere, and it's becoming more and more unavoidable, to be influenced by these algorithms. So it's a very important discussion to have. For the R&D Showcase, I'm very happy to announce that we have over 300 research posters and demos that our students are going to be presenting. This is the largest in IIIT history. We keep sort of, improving upon it every year. It actually amazes me. Every time we do this is the fourth year I'm coordinating this. And the fact that our institute is able to produce this quality of research at such a large quantity is absolutely amazing. So I'm very happy that we are able to set it up. Thank you. So they are, like I said, they are research posters. Students are going to be presenting these posters, so you can go around, talk to them about their research. Please ask them very difficult questions. about their research, and I'm hoping that they will be able to answer it and have a detailed discussion and debate about it. We are basically, so the setup is that this is all of the research posters are in this building. You can exit from the back doors there, and the floor above this and this floor are where most of the posters are, and the basement we have a very interesting center called Smart City Research Center, so do visit that as well. Thank you all for coming.